Hello everybody and welcome. We're very happy to be hosting today an event alongside our current online guest exhibition of posters from the Irish Civil Rights era. And I'm going to shortly hand over to Geoff Brown, who we thank very much indeed for helping us think through how to reinvent his exhibition as an online one. And we're very glad to have here also others who were involved in producing these posters. And the aim is to look at their relevance today as an example of radical activist communication. Our events are, as usual, free. However, we would encourage you to support the library if you are able to do so, while acknowledging that there'll be many other demands on your funds. The page to click to is www.wcml.org.uk/donate. And now over to Geoff.
Hi. So I'm going to just speak for a few minutes. I want to start by saying how, as Lynette points out, we are really doing this as a group. There is myself and Joe Robinson and Sarah Wilson and Sam Lord and Peter Dukes, who are all people who come from that period, 1968, 69, 70, 71, when we were making posters. And the posters which we were making were made using the silkscreen process. They were cut on a simple stencil, sometimes actually more than simple, I should add. And sometimes they were done for particular campaigns and groups. The Belfast posters were made basically for People's Democracy, which was a young radical organization, I think it's fair to say, that had come out of the Irish Civil Rights Movement in 1968. And by 1969, as the violence escalated in August, there was 1,000 families were burnt out of their homes in West Belfast. There was a number of people who came and helped, and in particular, I mean, she'll say more herself, Sarah was invited to come and make posters from the London Poster Workshop. And we made posters for a period of basically a month, to September 1969. And I want to say that, certainly speaking personally, I've been making posters as a student for a number of months before that. I've been, like so many other students at the time, inspired by what had happened in Paris in May 1968, where the Atelier Populaire was a huge poster workshop, which was making posters really on a 24-hour cycle. Very crudely, the students would have an assembly, would look at various possible posters, and would then decide which one they would make. They would make it that night, go out, fly post it at dawn. And as the feedback came as to which posters were working and things were moving on in terms of the struggles outside, so the posters became a series, which are actually now published and are really very well known. But actually, this was part of a much wider movement. And it's important to remember that 68 was a year, not only of revolutionary optimism, it was also the year of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech, but it was nevertheless a period where a huge number of people saw possibilities that about changing the world. And I think these posters, to some extent, are an important part of that movement. And I won't say any more about the London end, because I'd like Peter and Sarah and Joe and Sam to talk about that. I'll just say a little bit about the posters themselves, and I'm not sure whether we can share. Here we are. Can people see this? I'm trying to share the screen. Is this visible to people? I've now got.
I can certainly see it. I'm sure other people can. If you can get back up to the top.
I really want to get up to the. Here we go. So just quickly, here are two photographs from the time which actually show the posters being made, or one shows posters being made, and the other shows what was Radio Free Belfast, which was a pirate radio station heard by several tens of thousands of people, again running for the month of September and into October. The posters were made by people who, in some cases, had never made a poster before. This was made by a man called Rod Dixon, who I'm still trying to meet up with again. He'd never cut a stencil before, and it's not just a fantastically powerful image, it's also, I think, got a combination of an image and a political slogan, which was something which very much is part of the way in which posters were produced at the time. Here we have two more. I won't go into them in any detail. People can come back and look at the exhibition online. The Falls, as people may know, is working class Belfast, Catholic Belfast, I should say. Malone Road is the posh bit of Belfast. Mad Major was Chichester Clark, who was the Prime Minister of the time. Barricades were a central part of what was going on at that time. I mean, we were making posters within an area which was barricaded, quite literally, and the arguments about what would be done if the barricades were taken down, what negotiations could be agreed on, these went on throughout the month of September. The first people whom the British Army arrested in Belfast were actually arrested fly posting. They were actually fly posting the Falls, Burton, Malone Road Fiddles poster, and we made this poster Army Protection in response to the arrest. They were all actually given prison sentences. This one on the left is a very crude one which I made with, again, following ideas and a decision that this was the slogan. But more importantly, there is one on the right here which says Smash Stormont. And that poster was significant mainly because it was the first time that a real political argument opened up. There were people who thought that it was not correct to call for the smashing of Stormont. For us revolutionary students, it was a fairly obvious thing that you wanted to do that, but it wasn't the consensus by any means. And this was the one poster where I think it's true to say that very few of them actually got fly posted. There are more posters in the exhibition, but I don't want to talk about them because these were made in London. And here are two, which are obvious theme, and then there are more, which I just want to flash through. These are basically the very small selection of what was made in London and gives an idea, in particular, of the internationalism of the movement. I'll shut up at this point, and Lynette, perhaps you might invite one of the London poster workshop people, that is from Peter or Joe or Sarah or Sam, to follow me.
I am trying to unmute people, but because of the share screen, it's just taken me a while.
Right. Stop the share.
Peter is unmuted and Joe is unmuted. Let's find Sarah again.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Sarah's unmuted as well now.
Great. Go ahead, Joe, Peter, Sarah, you're unmuted.
Well, I'll hold back from talking about London because I will talk about Ireland later. I was part of the London Poster Workshop, but one of the others should talk about.
Can I make a little response to what Geoff said? Geoff, can you? Lynette, can you remove the posters so that we can see each other? Or Geoff, that's it.
There we go.
Can I just make an initial comment about this international movement that you talk about, Geoff? You sound as if it's some kind of coordinated or organized entity. It wasn't really that so much as feelings in different parts of the world that were given expression to by different organizations who were involved with those events in Paris, in Berkeley, in California, in London, and other places. So naturally they had a great deal in common and they communicated with one another and inspired one another. We were inspired, as you said, by l'Atelier Populaire in Paris, in France, and we had direct contact with one of them who came over and inspired us. But there was such a widespread kind of development in those circumstances, Vietnam, racism, all sorts of issues, housing issues that people needed, trade union issues and so on, student issues, people needed to give expression to. One of the things that the poster workshop did was to focus those issues, because they came to us and said, can you do, or can we do a poster about whatever it was that they were concerned with? That's just what I wanted to say as a sort of opening comment.
No, I absolutely agree. Yeah, yeah.
Sam, where are you?
I'm here. Well, I was just going to. My computer unfortunately keeps bringing up a sign saying your connection is unstable. So I could disappear at any minute.
Don't worry.
Don't worry about it. Just...
I've decided to just give a quick demonstration of the silk screen process.
Oh, brilliant.
Basically, I guess I introduced to the poster workshop. So silk screen is a very simple process, as Geoff has just said. And we made it as simple as you possibly could. You can spend a lifetime on techniques, but we just kept it gut rot simple. So I'll go and move my computer a little bit and put you down on a silk screen, which I think you could probably see here. The silk screen process was basically a wooden screen.
At the moment, Sam, we can't see you at the moment.
What you see?
Here we are.
I can see Sam.
Yeah, we're back in business.
I saw Sam, but not.
Put it down, so it's not really me you want to see. If you see the sheet over the
I saw him.
not see me at all. The unstable. You can't hear me, can you?
Can other people see anything? Because I'm not seeing anything.
No, I'm afraid Sam, who we should remember, is actually in Dumfriesshire, up in the...
Okay, so he's out in the wilds. Are you there, Sam? You're still trying? Apparently not.
No, I think we cut that. Yeah.
Look, just, I think, Geoff, as you kind of chairing it, continue, and Sam will come and join us and show us if and when he can. Sure. If I may say.
I mean, I think the point you made, Peter, that this was not a movement with any central organization. This was something which encouraged activity from below, and people just took initiatives of all kinds, large and small, and there was within this, things like these posters, were produced, but they now represent what is really the best visual recollection there is of the breadth and depth of activism that took place at this point. These are the sort of the years from 68 on.
It provided a medium for giving expression to the issues that concern people.
Exactly.
There were other records made, there are films and photographs and so on, but it was a very useful outlet.
I agree, but I also think that what's interesting is the way in which it becomes very often a kind of working tool of campaigning. I mean, one of the things that we have is, the way in which certain groups of workers, you should talk about it, not me, like the Ford workers in Dagenham got to use the workshop. There are posters which reflect the campaigning over rents and the homelessness. There are many different, the exhibition focuses on the international solidarity, whether it's South Africa or Vietnam, or the Black Civil Rights, or Black Power movement, I should say. All of these movements are movements which inspire people to actually go out and want to make something, which you then put on the street and then get a feedback almost immediately, because it's about a meeting or a demonstration. You're trying to get people to do things. And I'll just make one more point, which Eamon McCann made when we had a discussion about this last September, which is that the way in which you combine a slogan with an image was something which developed very powerfully through this medium. And I think that was something which was new in many ways in terms of the way in which campaigns organized themselves. Campaigns had always made
posters. They did it in the Russian Revolution, you know. The Chinese did it.
For them, in Ireland, yes, Eamon McCann made this point. Michael Farrell had also made it, that before they had just had words, really. They didn't have images, and having graphic images, sometimes with humor or making some point, really changed, apparently, the way they saw things and put things.
Well, I mean, what's his name? Ames. He used imagery during the war. His slogans and images. But the essence of what Paris were doing and what we were doing was simplicity itself. As Sam said earlier on, we made it possible for anybody to do virtually.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the real contribution, I think.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
You know, it's a simple...
Joe, you are unmuted. If you want to make a point, you are unmuted, Joe.
Yes, I really want to hear what other people have to say. I don't want an all-male conversation continuing. I want to hear what other people, the viewers, want to know what we did.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you like me to unmute everybody?
Yes.
Go on.
Absolutely.
Okay, Geoff, I'm going to pass it over to you at this point. Okay, if you want unmute all, over to you. Okay.
How do I do this? How do I? Okay, we're all unmuted now, actually.
Yeah, we are.
Everybody can speak. I mean, can I just start by welcoming Shante, who is in Notre Dame University?
Yeah.
Yeah. And she's actually got up early this morning because they're, I think, 5 or 6 time zones behind us, and picked up the exhibition and the event today using the net. And I'd just like to say, Shante, a little bit of, I'll ask you to say a little bit about, you know, what this exhibition means to you and why you are here this afternoon.
Thank you, Geoff, and thank you for including me. And I would actually be in Ireland about right now, but I would be in the Republic. And so I would have made my way up to Belfast. I was supposed to be in Belfast this summer, so I would have gotten a chance to see the exhibit, but I would have missed this event. So I'm glad to be able to participate in the event. I came across the website, a friend forwarded the website to me, and because they saw the Free Huey poster. And I'm, of course, from California. And so I was more curious in reading about the work and reading about the posters that you guys have made at the time. I'm curious about how the Black Power movement became involved, because it doesn't seem like it was solely through Bernadette and Dublin's involvement with the Panthers. It seems like in London, you guys were also in some ways filling a connection or a response to what was happening in Oakland and California and LA at the time.
Well, is that a question to Geoff or anyone else?
No, it's everybody.
To the poster makers.
Because there was a small Black Power movement in London, and we made posters for them. And I went out fly posting, helping them fly post, which we almost never did in London, but because of the prejudice against blacks, because I had a car and was white and a woman and with a nice middle class accent, I was able to sort of like cover for them, if you like. So we worked with them quite a lot, but they were, you know, they were small compared to the Black Panthers in the States.
What I guess I'm unfamiliar with what exactly the Black Power, were the power movement in London, were they inspired by Black Power movement?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
I think so, yes, but they also included Nigerian and other black
yeah.
countries. Yeah.
But we weren't a movement. We provided a service. We weren't the movement.
Yeah, people came to us, they came to hear about us by word of mouth probably, when they wanted a poster. And for me, and I think many of us, it was a huge learning curve to work there at all, because we didn't know, you know, there were liberation movements based there from all over the world. And, you know, people would come in, and anti-Vietnam War and also California grapes boycott, all sorts of different things, as well as things happening in England, strikes, rent strikes, Ford workers' strike. But we just did what people asked us to do, really. We didn't impose slogans on anybody. We used the words they wanted used, but we offered images and suggestions.
Yeah.
Did you ever say no to anyone? Make that slogan.
I don't think so.
I don't think so. Occasionally, if we thought the politics were too wishy-washy or liberal, we would have a bit longer debate, but we were quite open-minded. Well, actually, we have a situation that we've described quite often, not a case of saying no, but it was not knowing about the politics, the movements in South Africa. And at one stage, there was a group of men in African dress who came down and wanted a poster. And we had a 70-year-old East End Londoner who was a bit uncomfortable with this. And then apparently another group of men arrived. And in fact, it was the ANC. I think there was the PAC and the ANC who hated each other. And I think as a result, they had a row, and I think the ANC left, and we ended up making posters for the PAC. And later, when I learned they were allegedly financed by the CRA, I regretted that we ended up, but we didn't really make choices. We didn't know enough to make choices, and we didn't feel it was for us to make judgments unless we knew what we were doing.
So all of the images were brought. They would just bring the slogan or the slogan and the image, or they would bring the slogan and you guys created the image. I also noticed a lot of the raised fist. And so being from California, I had always associated the raised fist with the Panthers, but of course it has a longer history, but it's not something I learned about till later. But a lot of the posters have raised fists on them. So was that your contribution, or was that what the people that were coming to you?
Shall I take this?
Yeah, go
on. We had stock in trade things, the fist, you're absolutely right, and also demonstrations with lots of arms in the air and fists and banners. Because sometimes people would come in and they'd say, oh, we planned this demonstration, we just realized we need a poster, you know, in 2 hours' time or something. So we often had to just churn things out at the last minute. But we provided virtually all the images. I think there were some graphic artists who worked for us from home. If there was a bit more time, they would take it away and do it. But I've cut out here. Can you hear me?
No, we hear you fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're fine.
So yeah, we provided the images, and some are more original than others. Let's say some are sort of like churned out.
Okay. Thank you again. And I'm just to hear from other poster makers on obviously that international connection, which is most fascinating to me. But thank you.
I mean, I just want to say something about the importance of Black Power, because it wasn't, I mean, the actual activists in London were a small group, but I think it's important that Vietnam was probably the single overarching issue that engaged more people than anything else. And the question was, what was the resistance taking place in the heart of the beast? And that resistance was overwhelmingly Black. You know, it was what was going on there'd been a history, of course, of resistance in, going back to, to the civil rights movement. But here you actually had a real challenge that was being mounted by the Black Panthers. And I think it was that really meant that, when it came to taking up the Free Huey issue, campaign, this was something that people just didn't have to think about. You knew that you were, that's where you wanted to be. This was a poster that you supported.
Okay, come on then.
There's a question on the chat, Geoff, and everybody. Did the Irish paramilitaries ever object or comment on any of the posters?
Okay, I don't know. Does somebody else want to answer this? Because
not so far as I know. No, we were. I mean, the reason is, I think Geoff or somebody said I was invited by People's Democracy to go over there, but it wasn't me personally. They didn't know me. They approached Poster Workshop and asked us to send somebody, and I was the person who ended up going. And it was People's Democracy, I think, together with the Republicans. They haven't yet split into the provisional and official IRA, but it was a Republican building. So we were working alongside them, and I used a method we used a lot in London. I put a big board up in a community centre just along the road with a request for ideas for slogans and posters. And I would look at that every morning with the People's Democracy, and we would choose a few. So things like Falls Burns while Malone Road fiddles. I mean, I would never have come up with that myself. It was somebody there. And then I provided an image for that. But we didn't have problems, except I think Geoff said that there was something about the Smash Stormont, some political objection to that.
Yeah. Declan, you indicated.
Yeah, I grew up in Belfast. I was 15 at the time, living in North Belfast. Was attacked on the night of August, whatever. It was the first, inverted commas, mainly Catholic street, just off Tigers Bay in North Belfast, for those of you who know the area. And North Belfast, of course, Geoff slightly correctly, he said most of the attacks are in West Belfast. It was all over the place.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and what was interesting was, I think Shant mentioned about the civil rights movement, and that we quite consciously in the early days pinched songs and slogans from the American civil rights movement. It wasn't an accident, We marched in the streets chanting, "We shall not be moved," Yeah. Even the slogan, "Excuse the sexism, one man, one vote," came out of that area. And that relates to that discussion about Stormont. As somebody said, the Republic movement hadn't yet split, and I was only 15, but I had friends who were in it. And that issue was simmering, and it was a very strong one, because basically what became the officials were heavily involved in the civil rights movement. And their thing was always about reforming Stormont. Their perspectives, the Catholic and the Protestant working class, they said that had to be done before you could get Irish unity and before the fight for a socialist republic. Whereas what became the Provos basically thought that the old IRA had basically abandoned the working class communities in Belfast, and there was nobody there to protect them. So I'm interested to say, I'm surprised in a sense. Well, I'm not surprised that the Smythe Stormont poster caused issues. But I'm interested. Were you conscious at all of the looming split that was about to occur in the Republican movement at the time?
I'll come back quickly. No, not at all. I mean, Dolores Price was actually living in the same house that I was living in. We were all sleeping on floors and things, and the house belonged to was the house of Rita and Jerry O'Hare.
I knew them.
Very important People's Democracy activists who then become active in the provisional IRA thereafter. And the point I'm getting at is that transition where really People's Democracy, shrinks as an organization and loses much of its significance through the following months. At that time, the Republican movement isn't functioning in any real sense, I think is the way to put it. And it just beginning, and the tiny little story I have is at some point we were able to get a small income from photographers and TV people who would pay us a few pounds for coming and taking photos and doing some filming. And I was told I would collect this money, and I was told that there was now an agreement this would go 50-50 with us and the people who I was told ran the long bar, which was which was the bar where we all drank every evening. And there was this guy who sat there who was, looked incredibly old to me. I was 21. No, I was 19, sorry. And he must have been 50 something. I think it may have been Joe Cahill, who was a long time Republican IRA member, basically. And the deal was they got half of the money. Yeah.
Right.
And the point being that they were beginning to sort of flex their muscles, if that's the word, maybe not the right phrase. They were beginning to come something of a force. But the real issue was about the way in which the repression from the British Army was beginning to establish itself. I mean, I was stopped with a roll of posters under my arm by a young British officer who took them off me and told me that I could collect them from the Crumlin Road police station or some police station somewhere. And I got back to Rita and Jerry's and was told, whatever you do, you don't go and collect the post. I was incredibly naive, I have to say. The point I'm getting at is that this was a point where the army was still at that point being given cups of tea.
Yeah, I was making them.
Yeah.
I admit it.
You're forgiven, Declan.
Neil, yes.
It's Eileen, actually.
Eileen, sorry, my apologies. Yes, Eileen.
Neil, this is Neil. Really, I'd like to pursue this with Declan and everybody. Thank you very much, first of all, for putting it online. This was the exhibition I spotted in the Working Class Movement Library catalogue for the summer, and then when the virus happened, I was just delighted to find you put it online. So thank you. I would like to just push a little more for people who were there, Declan and yourself, Geoff, about this movement from civil rights into a more military struggle, because it was such an incredibly complicated period. And I just wondered if you'd like to expand a bit on that. I mean, why were you there, Geoff? Were you a student or?
I mean, I was a member of Revolutionary Socialist Student Federation. I'd made good friends with a man called Colm Larkin, who I met up again in last year in Belfast. And Colm came from Magherafelt. He was a young lad who, we were at Oxford. He was, and he took me to civil rights marches. The MP for West Belfast, a man called Jerry Fitt, led marches in Oxford for the Oxford Irish community, a very working class community, many of whom had jobs in the car factories. And I learned about what was going on in Northern Ireland. Like so many middle class English people, I hadn't got a clue what was being done in the north of Ireland. And that was something where I felt I knew something. And so when the thing kicks off in August, I just see it on telly and I just decided to go.
Thank you. And did you find yourself caught up in all these? Obviously, you were centrally concerned with the posters, but when things started to shift and move, and the civil rights movement started to, become more dispersed, were you pulled in different directions, or?
Actually, not at all. No. I mean, I think it's important to recognise that. The People's Democracy had actually come out of the student movement. It had been founded at Queen's University, Belfast, following an attack on a civil rights demonstration. And it had a very weekly meetings in Belfast, which we attended. There were similar meetings taking place elsewhere. This was a very lively movement. And to be honest, there was nothing else going on. What was really exciting about it was that, you know, the bulk of the meetings were young Protestants and Catholics. The first photograph I showed you, which is of two people making posters. The lad who's standing up, Davy, is a young Protestant lad. We, you know, made contact with his daughter, or rather Sarah made contact with his daughter recently. He emigrated. I mean, I think that the situation of people who were part of the Protestant community who identified with the civil rights movement became, I mean, my understanding is it becomes impossible. Yeah. You know, emigration was one of the ways you would resolve that, but other people would know much more than me.
Can Declan add something to this possibly, or?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I didn't want to speak again without really being asked. Like I said, I was 15 at the time, so I was involved with the local civil rights community in North Belfast, and we were aware at the time that, you know, there were big arguments about the role of the Republican movement and what else. And there were arguments. We had quite long discussions in the evening of whether you should be campaigning for reforming Stormont or abolishing it. I mean, it was a live issue where I lived. Probably more, if I'm honest, probably more 1970 than 1969. Because in 69, if you remember in August, a lot of, I hate the term, but I can't think of a better one, nationalist stroke Catholic communities were incredibly worried that they were going to get burnt out. We fought off an attack one night. And like I half joked about, when the British Army arrived the next day, we were delighted to see them because we actually thought we were about to be burnt out. Now the relationship deteriorated, not immediately. It probably took 8-9 months for it to really go downhill when it became clear that the role of the British Army wasn't, inverted commas, to keep the peace, but it was to shore up the Stormont government. But even after that, there were long, I mean, I'll shut up on people, but even after that, there were long arguments about what the right strategy should be, you know? Should it be, as the Provost thought, a military campaign to drive the British out? Or should it be a struggle for democratic reform? I'll say it strikes me as quite ironical now that you see these days what are the descendants of the Provost running the Northern Ireland state, the Unionists. I'll confess, I joined the Stickies in '71. I joined it, sorry, the officials. So I should tell you I'm biased, you know. Yeah. One of the reasons that drove me to join the officials was, believe it or not, the local Catholic priest who denounced us from the pulpit. He said he didn't like either wing of the Republican movement, but at least the Provost went to Mass on a Sunday. And I consider myself a socialist, whatever that meant, and the Provost didn't. I very much say I viewed them at the time as Catholic nationalists, though they swing to the left later. But I'll shut up because that's a much longer and more story.
We may have Sam back here. Sam, can you come back to us?
Limited degree, but I had it all set up when I conked out, so I've moved my location. So you're going to get some pretty hammy camera work, but yes, I'll continue with it. I haven't got the wooden screen anymore. I mean, basically, the idea of the poster workshop at the beginning was that anybody could come in. So all sorts of movements used the poster workshop, and we kept it simple so that anyone could design and print their own poster. So we had always, there was somebody there at the workshop, and so people could come in and do their own thing, or we could help them design it. And occasionally people were put in contact with other artists outside the workshop who just sent the artwork back, and we printed it. And so the idea of screen printing, this is where the dodgy bit comes in, because I haven't got the camera set up. So I'm going to have to hold it with one hand and try and sort it out a bit. But whether I can do this or not is another matter. I should get my wife, really, to hold it. It's a comedy, right? So it was at the wrong end of the house. So down here, there's the screen.
Bit more, Sam, bit more. Yeah. There we go. We are all foreign scum. Yes, we can see this.
One has to make noise for it to be full screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've lost his sound somehow. I'm not sure why.
No, but it's okay. We're seeing it.
Sam, talk to us if you can.
Yeah.
Louder. He's got to be near the mic.
Yes, he's lost his mic. Yeah, yeah.
Because if he can talk to us near the mic, we can get him full screen and then we can see what he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm actually holding. I must be very close to the mic.
Yeah, fine.
Sam.
Screen. And the idea is that you any bit that you want.
Sam, can you hear me?
Yep.
Sam, talk close to the microphone so we can hear you.
And shout if necessary.
But the trouble is, I've got to hold the.
Well, either you can or you can't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think I better abandon my presentation and.
You're doing fine.
Is Mary available? Is Mary available?
Is Mary available? She might be. I might have to find her though. She could hold the.
Okay.
That was my thinking.
If we could be so, yeah.
Well, is that better? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I'll try and do it from this point of view. So the screen is blocked out where you don't want it to print, and you then lay the. I'm going to cut this very short. You lay the screen down on. Mary, could you hold this up and point it until I say stop? Sort of more or less stop. Hold the computer up on the screen. That's it. Right, we're there. Great. I had left the squeegee in the other place, but what you do, you get the screen, put it on the paper, and you
near the mic.
Sorry.
Near the mic.
Okay, come in, Mary.
Yeah, perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
What it is that the screen has to point down to, so basically you have to be down here, I think, for you to hear me.
Mind the ink on your hair.
You're fine.
Anyway, you pour ink across the top, and then you pull the ink across the screen with a squeegee, which is unfortunately the other end of the building, and the ink goes through the gap, and you.
Right.
Which.
Hey.
We have to.
This was printed on the 26th of October, 1968, in response to the Tory MP from Ironmonger's comment that the anti-Vietnam demonstration was filled up with foreign scum. And I like this poster because it's internationalist, it's inclusive, maybe it niggerates us all a little bit.
No women.
No, the poster workshop, the funny thing about, well, it's not funny really, the thing about the poster workshop, all sorts of people came in to print, anarchists, CND, Communist Party, everybody really. And of course, as you know, it got to Northern Ireland, but there's no women. Yeah. And there's hardly any women in any of the poster workshop posters, which does say something about the attitude of the era. I mean, Sarah and Joe were there, so I mean,
there were women working in the workshop, Sam.
But this was before the women's movement. The women's movement changed everything.
There were plenty of women associated with the poster workshop. I'll not have this. There was you and Joe. There was Alison. There was Bernadette. There was Kelly. There was Billy Old. That's 5 just off the top of my head.
No, no, I agree, but we didn't have the same consciousness.
But if you took everybody that came in, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people came through, in one way or another. And this is about as inclusive as we got. No
Yeah.
Pointed out. But I like this poster anyway, which is why I'm showing it to you. I think that's I'm going to give up this sort of hanging about like this. Sorry, that demonstration was very carefully set up with curtains and everything, and it's our rural life.
Closer to the mic, Sam. Closer to the mic.
Yes, is that right?
No, actually.
I think it's just I'm miles away from anywhere. And
That's
it doesn't.
good.
No, I can hear you.
Yeah.
Can you get me now?
Good.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much of what nonsense I said you heard, but did you hear what I said about the we're all foreign scum or not?
Yes,
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 we did. Yeah,
yes,
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean,
I'm more or less run out of words to say, but other than the fact that the process itself is so simple that it allowed it to be used really basically throughout the world to put out ideas. And the poster workshop was basically an open forum where anybody could come in. By anybody, I mean anybody with reasonable political opinions. There was a inferior vetting process, but it was always very informal and ad hoc. There was never any formal thing doing. Peter ran the show really as the sort of organizational genius, and that was it really. And it went on from 69 to 71. And what happened was that at some point in the process, an old gentleman who's slightly younger than I am now, called Scrivener, he manned the poster workshop eventually and was there all the time. And eventually what happened was that we'd all come in at various times, but he'd always be there. And and what happened eventually was he was rehoused from King's Cross out to Brent, so he could no longer come in. And we had work to do, and we couldn't always be there all the time. And so eventually it just died a death.
That actually ties in with a question that somebody that Matt has asked on the chat. From the mid-70s, did you ever make any posters for the anarchist punk movement and then for CND, etc.?
Well, we did CND and the anarchists. It was pre-punk, punk being a bit later in the 70s. So, but yes, we did posters. One I remember was for Freedom, the anarchist paper about homelessness. And I mean, it's difficult to know how many anarchist posters you made because quite a large number of people coming in were sort of basically anarchists anyway, weren't they? At the time, and but probably didn't give themselves the name.
Sure.
Yeah, but CND. But we did one or two for the Communist Party. We did one or two. We were fairly Catholic in our tastes.
But can I mean, basically ask Sarah and Joe, because I mean, for people who don't know, that they've both been, how shall I put it, made international media stars through a movie called Misbehavior, which has just been issued, where both of them are actually significant figures. And this, of course, is the protest at the Miss World competition of 1970 in London. And my point is that there is a really interesting question here about the way in which the women's movement was just beginning to take off and explode, and yet it's not reflected in this wide range of campaigning that's being facilitated through the poster workshop.
Well,
oh, sorry, Sarah.
Or maybe does Joe want to say something? We closed in 1971. As with the civil rights movement, the women's movement began in the States and then came to England, inspired England, you could say. And the first Women's Liberation Conference was in Oxford in February 1970. And from there it grew, but there wasn't a long period of time. There were consciousness raising groups and others for women, but there wasn't a long period of time for that to actually affect consciousness of men or women to be reflected in the posters made by Poster Workshop. And I think by 1971, a lot of us were working in and or involved in other politics, and there less often. But there were other poster workshops, well, there's Red, whatever it was. There were others run by women later.
Poster
Workshop
was an on-demand service, and we were never asked to make any posters for women's issues.
Yes, that's a good point.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Can we pick up
another question from Sean say about can someone speak to the involvement with the agitprop street players? Do you remember any of the plays?
Yeah, I was one of them.
Go on, Peter.
I was part of the Agitprop Street Theatre company, and we morphed into Red Ladder Theatre in about 1969, and we had contacts with other radical theatre groups like CAST, the Cartoon Archetypical Slogan Theatre, and I suppose that the Red Ladder Theatre cast and the Poster Workshop, we knew each other, everybody knew each other, and that was part of a kind of cultural movement in London, Geoff. So you felt you were where where the action was, frankly, doing one thing or another thing. And sometimes the theatre groups would perform in the same venues or for the same organisations for which the Poster Workshop made posters. The LSE, student organisations and workers in Dagenham, for example. Or Essex University was another one.
The Agitprop Street Players and CAST, when the Poster Workshop got a bit short of money, they put on benefit concerts for us. Provided us with a bit of much needed dosh.
Yeah.
Because we didn't charge.
No,
we didn't charge for posters.
Yeah.
We asked for contributions.
Yeah. Can I just pick up on the point that Matt makes about, the mid-70s? Well, first of all, of course, the Poster Workshop finishes in 71, but I think it's worth making the point about the way in which litho comes in. I'm probably not the best person to talk about this, but I think it's important to recollect that the ability to produce cheap litho images of a large size, which are then printed by the 100 for relatively little cost, is something which doesn't come in, I don't think, until about 1970. And at that point, there are a whole number of people setting up community print shops. There's one set up in Manchester, for example, in Moss Side. And that becomes really quite an important part of the movement, but it does tend to replace the Poster Workshop using the, what Sam has been demonstrated, the method of squeegee and frame and stencil.
Yeah, I guess you have to have a bit more sophisticated organisation to run a litho workshop, really.
Yeah.
And people can't do it themselves. So
Yeah.
people can't come into the workshop and just set to and do it.
But the machinery is expensive to invest in.
Yeah.
The point of Poster Workshop was you just had to have a wooden frame and a bit of gauze across it and cut a stencil with a knife, and it was transferable and cheap. And also you could print 50 or a couple of hundred was about the maximum, but with litho posters, you needed to print about 1,000 for it to become at all economically viable.
We did runs of 500, Sarah.
Oh, we ran to, beg your pardon, yes, you're right, Peter.
Declan?
I can remember during the miners' strike in '74, I was at Essex University at the time, and we had virtually non-stop production of posters supporting the miners using this method, because that's what we had. Silkscreen. So we ran off thousands of posters in that period. It was also during the Essex occupation, so we had nothing else to do. So we must have run off. Some of the history of art students got quite inventive in the type of posters they developed using the silkscreen technique. Yeah,
but
exhibition since.
Having said which, 4 years or 5 years earlier, the poster workshop went to Essex.
All right.
And taught them how to make silkscreen. I'm just using the book here, which everybody
All
should.
right. Well, obviously they remembered.
Huh?
Obviously they remembered until '74, so that's good.
Well, yeah, I mean, Essex was well known as a centre of militancy.
Yeah.
Can I ask Edine, if I've pronounced your name? Yeah? Could you say a little bit about what you're thinking? You put up a note about inspiration.
You're muted.
I'm trying to unmute her. It's not working. There we go. You're unmuted.
I think we both unmuted me at the same time. I'm in the same place where Shante is at the University of Notre Dame, and I'm the Irish Studies librarian. And we have a small collection of posters. And quite recently, Cathal Gowan, I don't know if you know who he is.
I was at school with him, yeah.
Yeah, okay. He actually sent us as a gift that Falls Road Burns poster that he'd had with him for the last 40 years or so. But I find that my role in explaining things to students is trying to explain how things circulated. And young people now, anybody younger than me, doesn't even understand how pamphlets circulated. So even your discussion about posting the posters, we have to tell them the story about where people saw these things, how they got distributed. It's a whole world of things we have to explain to people because it's not part of their lives now. And then another thing that
there was no surveillance either, so that you could fly post things all over the front of the South African Airways office, saying sunny South Africa, ironically, and you didn't get caught doing it.
Yeah.
So
You did in Belfast.
Edine, sorry, carry on.
Well, it's just, it hadn't even occurred to me that silkscreen printing was something that you had to explain to people. I worked in the Dublin Public Libraries in the 80s, and silkscreen printing was how we made our posters. We didn't have anything more sophisticated. So I just, it's a new realization for me that that's a whole art and craft that has to be taught and explained, and the context and how it was affordable. And okay, that's me done.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Just quickly, have you been in contact with the Linen Hall Library in Belfast? Because they've got a wonderful collection of posters from the Why are you laughing, Geoff?
Well, because Sarah and I set up an exhibition in the Linen Hall, last August, and that's where we'd actually showed it as part of the Fela, the cultural festival in Belfast the month earlier, and then a month later we moved it to the Linen Hall, which was has you're right, a very important collection of posters.
Distribution was never our problem. We were not concerned with distribution. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So we were not concerned with distribution because people came to us and they had their own ways of doing things, their own places. It wasn't for us to distribute anything. Occasionally we made a poster for our own benefit, but that was very rare. So again, that wasn't our concern. But it's interesting that you say that you had to explain, Aideen, is it? Poster making to the new generations, and they might like to know that this is a way that they can give publicity to issues that are of concern to them. And it's an interesting way. It's a nice way of making things, and it's a nice process. Then you talk about distribution problems. It's up to them, the people who want to have a batch of posters, to distribute them themselves. Put them up where we wouldn't know where to put them up for somebody else. Finished.
There's actually some great fly posters gone up around Manchester city centre over the last few weeks by an artist called Craig Oldham, saying, I can't quite remember the thing, but it's never say low-skilled workers again, with a list of the people who are keeping everybody safe. So I don't know how he's doing it, but he's and they're quite big as well. They're very impressive.
Excellent, very good, fantastic issue.
Well, I mean, we did have a little discussion at one point whether we should invite Banksy to take part in this. Yeah, and the point is that I do think this idea of actually an image which you put up publicly, possibly illegally, wherever you put it, is something which still does catch the imagination. How does
he maintain his secrecy, his anonymity? How does he do it?
Well, if we knew, it wouldn't be.
You really think he would give his identity away by appearing in a forum like this?
Sure, I agree. He could always blank his screen out.
However, you should have invited him anyway. See what happens.
Yeah. But my point stands that I think there is an incredibly strong resonance of an image and possibly a slogan. In his case, just an image that connects with what's going on.
Yes. It's very good.
The other thing about printing, of course, is that most messages put out into the world now go off online. One of the things about screen printing, I mean, you say, average run maybe 150. That's nothing, But on the other hand, when you put it on the wall, everybody sees it. That passes that place, and it can be local, and it can deal with local conditions. It can summon people for one small event, and that's its strength, really. Online propaganda, it only gets looked at really by people who agree with it. The great thing about screen printing is everybody sees the poster who walked by.
Good point.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Yes.
Have we reached the point where we should ask people for final questions or final comments?
Yeah.
So people.
We've got. We'll do it. Yes. Final call. Any contributions? So yes, Sarah. While we're waiting. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say if there are people who haven't managed to get a question in yet, go ahead.
I'll just do a whiz through. Nobody's waving at me frantically or anything or typing, as far as I can tell. So we could have reached a conclusion. Geoff, are you happy with that? Any more you want to? To say?
I precisely just picking up the last point. Those of us who come out of this tradition of getting our hands incredibly dirty with ink and so forth, really do relish the real thing. And so without saying this exhibition will live again, I do think that people should keep coming to live exhibitions, and the Working Class Movement Library will continue to run them. But also I think that there is a future here, and I feel that we need to sort of explore this. There were students who came to the discussion we had at the Fela in July, who actually specifically came because as art students, they really were looking for something which was not just sitting at a keyboard, typing and looking at a big screen, which something where you made things using, in this case, a scalpel and paper, and then all the rest of it. And I just think that that's something which we need to encourage and develop even now.
Okay. Always good to end on a call to action. So thank you very much to Geoff, and thank you to everybody else who has contributed from near and far. An interesting example of an event we would not have been able to put on in the library annex because people would have been too far away. So for all that we are sorry not to be together, there are some ways in which obviously this this technology is helping us be together if separate. So we have got a lot of other events coming up, and we actually have one tomorrow. So if you're able to join us again tomorrow at 2, it's the next in our Invisible Histories talk, and we've got Alison Felt talking to us on the legacies of wartime strikes, interwar women trade union leaders in France and Britain. And just a reminder, this talk has been recorded, and we will be uploading it onto our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/WCM Library. And those are working very well with people who are not able to be around at the time, but are catching up later. And a further reminder that our talks are, as usual, free, but if you do want to hit the donate button on our website, we would be, of course, most grateful. So thanks again to everybody involved, and goodbye until possibly tomorrow. We hope to see some of you again, but certainly we hope to see you at some future event in real life or on Zoom. And I sign off by saying take care, in solidarity. All the best from everybody at the Working Class Movement Library. Goodbye.
Thank you.